The crystal chandelier cast fractured rainbows across the marble floor of the penthouse, each shard of light a mockery of the perfection Victoria Sterling had once believed in. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the Seattle skyline, blur through tears she refused to let fall. The city sprawled below like a circuit board, all glittering connections and pulsing energy. Everything Marcus Blackwood had built his tech empire to control. At 28, Victoria had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of corporate marketing with the grace of a diplomat and the cunning of a chess master. Her campaigns had helped launch 3 major tech startups, her strategic mind earning respect in boardrooms full of men who initially saw only her auburn hair and green eyes. But none of that mattered now. Not when her own husband looked at her, like she was a line item to be deleted from his personal spreadsheet. Marcus entered their living room with the measured pace of a predator, his charcoal suit immaculate despite the late hour. At 35, he commanded Blackwood Technologies with an iron fist wrapped in algorithmic precision. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his steel-gray eyes held the same warmth they showed his quarterly. Reports? Absolutely none. "We need to discuss our arrangement," he said, his voice carrying that peculiar tone he used during hostile takeovers. He didn't look at her, instead moving to his private bar to pour himself 2 fingers of 20-year-old. Scotch! Victoria's stomach clenched. She'd been dreading this conversation for weeks, ever since she'd noticed the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the way he flinched when she touched him. "Marcus, if this is about the Henderson campaign, I can explain. It's not about your work." He finally turned, and she saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Complete emotional disconnection. "This marriage has served its purpose. I'm terminating our contract." The words hit her like a physical blow. Contract. Not relationship, not marriage, not the love she'd foolishly believed they'd built together. "What are you talking about?" Marcus took a deliberate sip of his scotch, savoring it the way he savored, closing deals. "I found someone more compatible with my current objectives. Jade Chen. You might know her. She has quite the social media presence." Victoria knew exactly who Jade Chen was. The 24-year-old lifestyle influencer with her perfectly contoured face and 3 million followers. She'd seen Marcus liking her posts, telling herself it meant nothing. Rich men liked pretty pictures. It was harmless vanity. "You're leaving me for an Instagram model?" The question came out as a whisper, disbelief making her voice small. "I'm optimizing my personal brand," Marcus corrected with infuriating calm. "Jade understands the importance of public image. She's young, vibrant, and her demographic reach is exactly what Blackwood Technologies needs for our next phase of growth." Victoria stared at him, searching for any trace of the man who had once recited poetry to her in this very room, who had promised her the world when he'd slipped that massive diamond onto her finger 3 years ago. That man had been an illusion, a carefully crafted persona designed to win her just as he won everything else, through calculated manipulation. "So I'm what? Obsolete?" She laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Yesterday's software that needs updating?" "You're taking this personally." Marcus set down his glass with a decisive click. "This is business, Victoria. It always has been. You provided value. Connections in the marketing world, intellectual companionship, social respectability. But markets evolve, and so do requirements." The casual cruelty of his assessment stole her breath. She had been an acquisition, a strategic asset to be leveraged and eventually discarded. Every loving word, every intimate moment, every shared dream had been data points in his grand algorithm of success. "I've already had my lawyers draft the divorce papers," Marcus continued, checking his Patek Philippe watch as if this conversation was cutting into more important matters. You'll find the terms generous. I'm not unreasonable. Victoria's marketing mind, trained to spot manipulation and counter it, finally kicked into gear through her emotional shock. How generous? Generous enough that you'll never have to work again, provided you sign the non-disclosure agreement and don't make this messy. There it was, the trap wrapped in velvet. Take the money, disappear quietly, and let Marcus Blackwood rewrite. Their history, however, suited his narrative. Let the world think she'd failed to hold on to her brilliant husband, that she'd been found wanting and replaced by someone younger, prettier, more worthy. Victoria walked to the window, her reflection, ghost-like against the night sky. Below, the city pulsed with ambition and possibility, with people fighting and clawing their way to the top just as she had. She'd been so focused on supporting Marcus's ascent that she'd forgotten her own capacity for war. When she turned back, her tears had dried, and something harder had taken their place. No, Marcus raised an eyebrow, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him all evening. I'm sorry? I said no. Victoria's voice was steady now, each word precisely articulated. If you want a divorce, Marcus, you'll get one, but it won't. Be on your terms, and it won't be quiet. You want to optimize your brand? Let's see how your shareholders feel about the CEO who abandons his wife for social media publicity. For the first time in years, Marcus Blackwood looked genuinely surprised. He'd expected tears, pleas, perhaps a dignified capitulation. He had not expected a declaration of war from the woman he'd so thoroughly underestimated. The game, Victoria realized, was just beginning. The law offices of Rodriguez and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of Elliott Bay. Victoria sat across from Nina Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed attorney whose reputation for dismantling powerful men in divorce court was legendary. Nina's dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her burgundy suit conveyed both professionalism and barely contained fury as she reviewed Marcus's proposed settlement. This isn't a divorce agreement, Nina said, sliding the papers back across her mahogany desk. This is an insult wrapped in legal jargon. He's offering you peanuts while trying to gag you with an NDA so broad it would prevent you from even mentioning his name in casual conversation. Victoria had spent the past week in a hotel suite using the time to research divorce attorneys and plot her strategy. The initial shock had crystallized into cold determination. What are our options? We fight. Hard. Nina leaned forward, her brown eyes gleaming. Your husband made one crucial mistake. He thinks you're powerless, but you helped build his empire. Victoria, you have intimate knowledge of his business practices, his deals, his methods. In Washington state, we have equitable distribution laws. You're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. The number Nina quoted made Victoria's head spin. Half of Marcus's fortune would make her one of the wealthiest women in the Pacific Northwest. More importantly, it would give her the power to rebuild her life on her own terms. 2 weeks later, Victoria attended the annual Seattle Tech Innovation Gala, an event she'd helped organize for 3 consecutive years. She wore a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves and radiated confidence she was still learning to feel. The ballroom buzzed with venture capitalists, startup founders, and tech executives, the digital aristocracy of the modern world. She was nursing a glass of champagne and avoiding the pitying glances of acquaintances when a familiar voice spoke. Behind her, Victoria Sterling. I was hoping I'd see you here. She turned to find Ethan Cross approaching with 2 glasses of wine and a warm smile that reached his hazel eyes. At 32, Ethan was Marcus's most formidable rival, the CEO of Nexus Dynamics, a company that had been steadily eating into Blackwood Technologies' market share with innovative AI solutions and ethical business practices that made Marcus's cutthroat methods look antiquated. Ethan, she said, accepting the wine, I'm surprised you're here. This crowd usually worships at the altar of Marcus Blackwood. Not everyone. Ethan replied, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Some of us prefer to build our own altars. He gestured toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. Walk with me? Victoria had met Ethan several times at industry events, always in Marcus's shadow. He was handsome in an understated way. Sandy. Brown hair, intelligent eyes, and a lean frame that spoke of weekend rock climbing rather than obsessive gym sessions. Where Marcus commanded rooms through intimidation, Ethan earned respect through genuine charisma. I heard about the divorce, Ethan said as they found a spot away from the crowd. I'm sorry. That can't be easy. It's liberating, actually, Victoria replied, surprised by how true the words felt. I'm discovering who I am when I'm not trying to be the perfect corporate wife. Ethan studied her face in the soft lighting. You know, I've always thought you were wasted in that role. Your marketing campaigns for Blackwood were brilliant, too brilliant for someone who was supposedly just playing support staff. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. For years, Marcus had taken credit for her ideas, relegating her contributions to footnotes in his success story. Thank you. That means more than you know. I have a proposition, Ethan said, his tone shifting to business. Nexus is launching a new product line next quarter, ethical AI solutions for small businesses. We need someone who understands both the technology and how to communicate its value to ordinary people, someone who can humanize innovation instead of weaponizing it. Victoria's pulse quickened. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Head of Strategic Communications, full equity package, complete creative control over your campaigns. Ethan's eyes were serious now. I know Marcus probably had you sign a non-compete, but my lawyers are very creative. We can work around it. The offer was everything Victoria hadn't dared to hope for, a chance to use her skills for something meaningful, to build rather than destroy. But accepting meant declaring open war on Marcus, positioning herself with his greatest enemy. Why? She asked. Why take the risk of hiring Marcus Blackwood's ex-wife? Ethan's smile was enigmatic. Because you're not Marcus Blackwood's ex-wife, Victoria. You're Victoria Sterling, and you're brilliant in your own right. It's time the world saw that. As they talked through the details of the position, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years, excitement about her future. Ethan listened to her ideas, built on them, treated her as an equal rather than an accessory. When he laughed at her jokes, it wasn't the polite chuckle Marcus had perfected, but genuine amusement. Across the ballroom, she caught a glimpse of Marcus entering with Jade Chen on his arm. The young woman was stunning in a gold dress that probably cost more than most people's cars, her smile perfect and practiced for the cameras that immediately swarmed them. Marcus looked every inch the successful mogul with his trophy girlfriend, but Victoria noticed the way his eyes swept the room until they found her. For a moment, their gazes locked across the crowded space. Victoria saw surprise flicker across his face as he registered who she was talking to, followed by something darker. She raised her wine glass in a mock toast, her smile razor-sharp, then turned her attention back to Ethan. When do I start? She asked. The next morning, Victoria's phone exploded with notifications. Marcus's legal team had filed an emergency, motion to freeze her assets and enforce her non-compete clause. The message was clear. He wouldn't let her go quietly, and he certainly wouldn't let her work for his rival. But as Victoria sat in her hotel room reading the legal documents, she felt no fear, only anticipation. Marcus had just shown his hand, revealing exactly how threatened he felt by her potential alliance with Ethan. It was a strategic error born of ego and desperation. Nina Rodriguez was already crafting their response when Victoria called. He's panicking, Nina said with satisfaction. Good. Panicked men make mistakes, and Marcus Blackwood just made a big one. The war had officially begun, and Victoria Sterling was no longer fighting just for her freedom. She was fighting for her future. Part 3. Dangerous Territory. 3 months into her new role at Nexus Dynamics, Victoria had transformed the company's public image from tech startup to industry disruptor. Her campaign for their ethical AI platform, Technology with a Conscience, had garnered national attention and attracted major clients who were tired of Blackwood Technology's aggressive tactics. She worked 16-hour days, pouring her energy into proving she was more than Marcus's discarded wife. The Nexus offices occupied a converted warehouse in Pioneer Square, its exposed brick walls and reclaimed wood floors, creating an atmosphere of innovation rather than intimidation. Victoria's corner office overlooked the courtyard, where employees gathered for impromptu meetings, and her department's brainstorming sessions often spilled into the common areas. It was everything Marcus's sterile corporate fortress wasn't: collaborative, creative, and genuinely human. "The Morrison Industries contract is official," Ethan announced, entering her office with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Your presentation convinced them to dump Blackwood and switch to our platform. That's a $12 million account." Victoria felt a surge of triumph that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with genuine accomplishment. Morrison was considering Blackwood for 5 years. Marcus must be furious. "Marcus is more than furious," Ethan said, his expression growing serious as he poured the champagne. "My sources tell me he's launched a full investigation into our company. He's trying to find anything he can use to discredit us, or you specifically." Over the past months, Victoria and Ethan's professional relationship had evolved into something deeper and more complex. Late nights working on campaigns had turned into dinners where they talked about everything except business. Ethan shared stories of his childhood in rural Oregon, his struggle to build Nexus from nothing, his vision of technology as a force for good rather than domination. Victoria found herself opening up about her dreams of travel, her abandoned plans for graduate school, the woman she'd been before Marcus reshaped her into his ideal companion. "Let him investigate," Victoria said, accepting her glass. "I have nothing to hide, don't we?" Ethan's question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications they'd both been avoiding. Victoria set down her champagne, her heart racing. They were standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. The attraction had been building for weeks. Glances that lingered too long, hands that brushed while reaching for the same document, conversations that felt more like intimate confessions than professional discussions. "Ethan," she began, but he stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I know the timing is terrible," he said softly. "I know you're still technically married, still fighting Marcus in court." The Seattle Business Journal's front page featured a stunning photograph of Victoria and Ethan at the Technology Leadership Awards, her hand in his as they walked the red carpet. The headline read, "Power Couple or Corporate Scandal, Sterling Cross. Alliance Rocks Tech World." Victoria had chosen her strategy, and there was no turning back. Detective Ray Morrison had been investigating white-collar crime for 15 years, but the Blackwood case was unlike anything he'd encountered. The 40-year-old former Marine sat in his cramped office reviewing security footage, financial records, and witness statements that painted a disturbing picture of Marcus Blackwood's escalating obsession. He hired 3 separate private investigation firms, Ray explained to Nina Rodriguez during their clandestine meeting in a downtown coffee shop. When the first company refused to dig deeper into Ms. Sterling's personal life, he fired them and found someone more flexible with ethical boundaries. Nina stirred her latte thoughtfully. "How flexible?" "Illegal surveillance. Attempted. Hacking of Nexus Dynamics servers, and what appears to be a coordinated campaign to spread false information about Ms. Sterling's professional conduct." Ray slid a folder across the table. "I can't use most of this in court, but I thought you should know what you're dealing with." Nina opened the folder and felt her blood chill. Photos of Victoria taken with telephoto lenses through her apartment. Windows. detailed financial records obtained through questionable means, transcripts of illegally recorded phone conversations between Victoria and her therapist. Marcus wasn't just fighting a divorce, he was waging psychological warfare. Meanwhile, Victoria was discovering that going public with her relationship had consequences she hadn't anticipated. The tech community was divided between those who admired her courage and those who whispered that she'd traded one powerful man for another. Industry blogs dissected every aspect of her career, questioning whether her success at Nexus was legitimate or simply the result of pillow talk. The Venture Daily called me the Black Widow of Silicon Valley, Victoria told Ethan as they reviewed the latest round of press coverage in his office. Apparently, I seduce tech moguls and then destroy them. Ethan looked up from his laptop, his jaw tight with anger. The Venture Daily is owned by a subsidiary of Blackwood Holdings. Marcus is literally paying people to destroy your reputation. The realization hit Victoria like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't content with winning their divorce. He wanted to ensure she could never rebuild her life or career. Every negative article, every whispered rumor, every door that closed in her face was part of his orchestrated campaign of destruction. There's something else, Ethan said, his voice careful. Our biggest client, Meridian Corp, is reconsidering their contract. Their CEO received an anonymous package containing evidence of your alleged corporate espionage. Victoria felt the room spin. Meridian represented 30% of Nexus's revenue. Losing them would cripple the company and validate every accusation Marcus had made. What kind of evidence? Faked emails supposedly showing you sharing Blackwood's proprietary algorithms with our development team. The forgeries are sophisticated. Someone spent serious money making them look authentic. The scope of Marcus's campaign was breathtaking. He was attacking her from every angle, using his vast resources and network of connections to isolate her professionally and personally. But Victoria had learned something important during her months at Nexus. She wasn't the same broken woman who had stood in that penthouse accepting dismissal. We need to go on the offensive, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. That evening, Victoria met with Nina and Detective Morrison at the lawyer's office. Outside, Seattle's perpetual rain created a gray curtain that seemed to shield them from the world's prying eyes. We have enough evidence to file criminal charges against Marcus for illegal surveillance and cyber harassment, Morrison explained. But prosecutors are reluctant to take on someone with his resources unless we have an airtight case. What would make it airtight? Victoria asked. Morrison and Nina exchanged glances. We need him to incriminate himself, Nina said carefully. If we could get him to admit his actions on record. You want me to wear a wire? Victoria realized. It's dangerous, Morrison warned. Men like Marcus Blackwood don't react well when they feel cornered. His behavior is already escalating. There's no telling how far he might go if he suspects you're gathering evidence against him. Victoria thought of the photos taken through her apartment windows, the lies being spread about her work, the systematic destruction of everything she'd built. Marcus had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd pushed her past the point of fear, into a realm where she had nothing left to lose. Set it up, she said. 2 days later, Victoria sat in the penthouse she'd once called home, wearing a device so small it was virtually undetectable. Marcus had agreed to meet, ostensibly to discuss a reasonable settlement that would end their public battle. But Victoria knew better. This was his attempt to regain control, to remind her of his power. Marcus looked older than she remembered, his perfect facade showing cracks of stress and sleepless nights. His suit was still impeccable, his hair still perfectly styled, but his eyes held a manic intensity that made her skin crawl. You've certainly made a spectacle of yourself, he said, pouring himself a scotch without offering her anything. Dating my competitor, playing the victim in the media. It's quite the performance. It's not a performance, Marcus. It's my life. Your life? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have no life without me, Victoria. I created you, shaped you, gave you purpose. And this is how you repay me? By spreading lies about our marriage and whoring yourself out to my enemies? The vulgarity of his words, the casual cruelty, was exactly what Nina had hoped to capture. But Victoria felt her composure slipping as Marcus moved closer, his presence filling the space with an oppressive weight. I know what you've been doing, she said quietly. The surveillance, the false evidence, the smear campaign. I know about all of it. Marcus's smile was cold and predatory. Prove it. I don't have to prove it, Marcus. I just have to survive it. And I will. Because unlike you, I don't need to destroy people to feel powerful. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, the mask finally slipping to reveal the rage beneath. You think you're so strong now, don't you? You think Ethan Cross gives you power? He's using you, Victoria, just like I did. The only difference is that I was honest about it. The only honest thing about you is your complete lack of humanity, Victoria replied, standing to leave. Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. You're not walking away from me again. I decide when this ends, not you. For a moment, Victoria saw something genuinely dangerous in his eyes, a desperation that had moved beyond rational thought into something darker and more primal. She pulled free of his grip and walked toward the door, her heart pounding, but her steps steady. This ends when the court says it ends, she said without turning back. And when it does, you'll have nothing left but your money and your emptiness. As she waited for the elevator, Victoria heard the sound of glass shattering against the wall. Marcus Blackwood, the man who controlled everything in his path, was finally losing control. The recording device had captured every word, every threat, every admission of guilt. But Victoria realized that the real victory wasn't in the evidence they'd gathered. It was in the fact that she'd faced her destroyer and walked away unbroken. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Victoria believed she could win. Part 5. Checkmate. 6 months later, Victoria stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new corner office at Sterling Communications, her own agency, built from the ground up with the settlement money that Nina Rodriguez had fought to get. Secure. The Seattle skyline stretched before her, transformed by late afternoon light into something that looked almost like hope. The criminal charges against Marcus had created a media firestorm that consumed his carefully crafted public image. Detective Morrison's investigation, bolstered by Victoria's recorded conversation, had uncovered a web of illegal surveillance and corporate espionage that extended far beyond their divorce. Federal prosecutors had seized Blackwood Technologies' servers, revealing years of unethical business practices that Marcus had hidden behind his veneer of success. The Chronicle wants to do a feature story, announced Jamie Walsh, Victoria's 26-year-old assistant and former journalist who had joined the agency after becoming disgusted with the tech industry's treatment of whistleblowers. They're calling you the woman who brought down a tech titan. Victoria shook her head, turning from the window. I didn't bring him down. He brought himself down. I just refused to be buried in the rubble. The truth was more complex than any headline could capture. Marcus's obsession with destroying Victoria had consumed him completely, leading to increasingly reckless decisions that had alienated his board of directors and key investors. While he'd been focused on surveillance and sabotage, Nexus Dynamics had secured 3 major contracts that Blackwood Technologies had been pursuing for years. His empire had crumbled not because of external attack, but because he'd abandoned his business to wage a personal war he was destined to lose.